Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Friday everybody. Weekend is almost upon us. Hope you have a productive day and a restful weekend ahead. Just a piece of housekeeping. There may not be an episode tomorrow. If there is not an episode, I will make up for it with an episode on Sunday, but I will endeavour to release one tomorrow. I also hope to be back to regular episodes on Monday, assuming I do not get in trouble for this episode. Indeed, there is a lot of sensitive content in today's video, but we need to discuss it, so we proceed. First up, after weeks of speculation which was too thinly supported to be covered here, several reports suggest that PRC Defence Minister Li may indeed be under investigation, and soon to follow, former Foreign Minister Qin as the second high-ranking official to fall this year. We also remember that 2 months ago, Xi Jinping removed the 2 top generals at the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, which oversees China's rapidly expanding arsenal of long-range missiles and nuclear weapons. For today, we just take note of these relevant reports, and we will cover future developments as we learn the details. UK-based Reuters broke the story that Defence Minister Li, quote, abruptly pulled out of a meeting with Vietnamese defence leaders last week, 3 officials with direct knowledge of the matter said, amid questions about his more than 2 weeks-long absence from public view. End quote. The reason given for this sudden withdrawal was health reasons. Then there is also a UK-based Financial Times article, which yesterday reported that the US government believes that Li has been placed under investigation, quote, in the latest sign of turmoil among elite members of Beijing's military and foreign policy establishment. End quote. 3 US officials and 2 people briefed on the intelligence reportedly told the outlet that the US had, quote, concluded that Li, who has not been seen in public for more than 2 weeks, had been stripped of his responsibilities as defense minister. End quote. Commentators speculate that if there is an investigation, it could be related to equipment or weapons procurement from the time Li was head of the Equipment Development Department of the Central Military Commission. That is, an accusation of corruption. If this is the case, there are very serious political implications. Quote, Li, the Rocket Force leaders, and of course disappeared former Foreign Minister Qin are all Xi's promotions. More purges will likely be seen as the solution. What a mess. The start of the 3rd term of the Xi era looks a bit wobbly. End quote. Next up, we continue with developments related to tensions in the Taiwan Straits. Today's content is intended to supplement what we covered on this topic in yesterday's video. The People's Liberation Army has started sizable military exercises around Taiwan, mobilizing sea vessels and aircraft from different theater commands to take part in the so-called Island Encirclement Patrol exercises, which analysts say could signal the testing of a surprise attack strategy. As of the 4 days ending 6 a.m. on Thursday, yesterday, Taiwan's Defense Ministry had tracked at least 143 People's Liberation Army warplanes and 56 warships entering its air defense identification zone, with 68 sorties entering the zone in the final 24 hours of this period. Japan's Ministry of Defense said on Thursday that planes as far away as the eastern province of Shandong, north of the Yangtze River, were spotted taking off and landing for the exercises. Quote, it looks to me like they were practicing sustained air operations toward the West Pacific in conjunction with their carrier exercises, something we haven't seen at this scale before. End quote. He added that the People's Liberation Army was likely practicing enforcing a blockade around the island. Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post reported yesterday, citing an unnamed PRC military source, that the number of PLA aircraft involved in the drills was probably higher, as, quote, Beijing's J-20 stealth fighters had also joined, but the island's radar systems could not detect the advanced aircraft, end quote. With the source reportedly telling the outlet, quote, China so far has more than 200 J-20s, a response to the United States' deployment of hundreds of F-35 Lightning II planes to the region. End quote. We remember from yesterday's video, Beijing on Tuesday outlined measures to smooth the way for Taiwanese to live, work and study in the province of Fujian, integrating the two economies. This economic plan, combined with these drills, appear to be a kind of carrot and stick offer from Beijing to the people of Taiwan as they move towards their presidential election in 4 months' time. However, some analysts argue that the heavy-handedness of the stick may greatly reduce trust in the carrot. Trust already hurt after Beijing's response to the Hong Kong protests back in 2019. Put another way, it's argued that Beijing is sending confusing, mixed messages. Quote, "The plan encourages Taiwanese to buy homes in Fujian and to find work there to realize their dreams in China," as the document says. But when Beijing keeps threatening Taiwan with military aggression, how are Taiwanese supposed to process all this information? End quote. Some state media commentary likely isn't helping, with the state-run Global Times writing yesterday in response to Taipei's rejecting of Beijing's plan that the ruling DPP party's, quote, "smearing of the latest mainland policy reveals its bigotry and short-sightedness," end quote. And then there are the military-run articles. Quote, "The collusion between Taiwan and the US will mean nothing but the destruction of Taiwan. Their actions are turning Taiwan into a landmine island and an ammunition depot, seriously threatening the safety and well-being of Taiwan compatriots." End quote. Next up, the Chinese economy. If you're enjoying today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing are all helps for the channel. And for anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep China Update financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a lot of work, but all your support are all incredible sources of motivation. So thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. For the rest of today's video, we cover a few salient updates related to China's economy. First up, let's look at China's reaction to the European Union probe into electric vehicle subsidies, which the EU announced on Wednesday, and which we discussed in detail in yesterday's video. On Thursday, the PRC Ministry of Commerce, quote, "expressed serious concern and strong dissatisfaction on the European Union's decision to launch an anti-subsidy probe into Chinese electric vehicles," end quote. In an official statement, the ministry said that the measures proposed by the EU are a, quote, "blatant act of protectionism in the name of fair competition, which will severely disrupt and distort the global automotive, industrial and supply chain, including that of the EU, and have a negative impact on China-EU economic and trade relations," end quote. The reaction is, of course, no surprise. As we discussed yesterday, some of China's biggest EV brands, which have been outperforming many around the world, are vulnerable to anti-subsidy investigations. An executive with BYD, China's largest EV manufacturer, for example, told Chinese financial media outlet Caixin that the company expects that Chinese automakers will eventually be subject to anti-subsidy duties in Europe. Quote, "That's despite a possible backlash against Germany, whose automakers, such as Volkswagen AG, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, have a significant presence in the Chinese market and may fear retaliation from Beijing," end quote, adds the outlet. US-based Bloomberg, in an article titled "From Cheap Money to Tax Breaks, EVs in China Get a Lot of Love," writes that the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology pays car companies subsidies based on the number of EVs they produce. Through the end of last year, it had paid almost 39 billion yuan, $5.4 billion to subsidize the production of around 3.76 million new energy vehicles. About 31 billion yuan of that was paid just last year to 49 eligible car companies, with the above-mentioned BYD getting the most. Domestic commentators in China, however, push back against this, with industry insiders telling Chinese financial media outlet Yicai this week that, quote, "Chinese new energy vehicle manufacturers do not intentionally undercut their rivals in Europe. The prices of their new energy vehicles are not kept artificially low. Prices of such vehicles exported to Europe are lower than similar products sold in the bloc by non-Chinese brands, but are higher than the prices domestic manufacturers charge in China, end quote. One US-based China analyst mused on these developments today, quote, "Given how the PRC treats Tesla as a security threat and bans those vehicles from some spaces, I'm surprised the EU is not making this about national security," end quote. Though that could only be a matter of time. Next up, and finally for the economy and today's video, we just take note of a new report published by Jinan University's Institute for Economics and Social Research in collaboration with Zhaopian Recruitment, called the 2023 China New Flexible Employment Report. The report makes the troubling observation that the proportion of job seekers in new so-called flexible employment is growing at a rapid rate, with many college graduates and undergraduates taking jobs from this informal sector, which is considered a subprime form of employment. The report writes, quote, 60% of new flexible employment jobs postings do not specify education requirements. However, the educational level of job seekers is relatively high, with about 45.5% being undergraduates. Compared to traditional employment, job seekers in flexible employment are more likely to downgrade their job search, with their own educational qualifications exceeding the requirements of the positions they apply for, end quote. China's youth unemployment has become a serious economic issue for policymakers. Officially, youth unemployment is at the already high rate of over 20%, or it was until Beijing decided to stop publishing the data altogether earlier this year, a move very telling in of itself. Of course, some commentators argue that the true rate could be much higher, pushing some Chinese analysts and advisors to warn that if Beijing doesn't act fast, this economic crisis could well fast mutate into a political one. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Friday, have a good weekend, and if all goes to plan, I will see you all tomorrow.